Okay. Thanks very much to our support from the Democratic and Member Services team in Northampton. So today we have a formidable team of ladies from the UK, but mostly from Northampton. Most of them are educators, and we are so excited to be with them this afternoon. Marianne, what are you looking forward to before we introduce ourselves today?
Good afternoon, ladies. I'm looking forward to hearing what we need to do more about our education. I think I'm more concerned about the impact of COVID and homeschooling and getting any tips we can get to homeschool until the children go back to school. That would be helpful for me.
Okay, super. And just to say that, you know, these things are can be complex when we're online. Our networks can be a bit quirky. So if we pause and ask the speaker to repeat themselves, is because maybe the network is a little bit poor from where they are. So just to say that today we are dealing with education, and education, particularly that of young women. But also we know that we will touch on our young boys as well. So we are looking forward to listening to different views, and I know that our audience will also be able to contribute as well. We have Dr. Sabina Franklin, who's an academician, also a researcher, and she has a wealth of experience in writing and also UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we're gonna hear what she has to say. We also have Mosia Walker. Mosia is also known as our carnival lady in Northampton. Whenever there is Northampton Carnival, Mosia has got to be there. Since I moved to Northampton, Mosia has been organizing, one of the organizers of the Northampton Carnival. She's a teacher by profession and was an education officer, and she's still actively involved, I know, with a lot of education programs, and NSB is one place that we also find Mosia, and it's just a privilege to have you. Mosia is also MBE for all her work that she does for Northampton. We have with us Esther Mcintosh. She's been on the show before. She's an educator and she has an online tutoring business. She runs Ignite Education, which is a fantastic service. Again, fantastic educator, rich history in teaching, and has a lot of, she's got something to tell us and for us to learn from her. Nick Pedro is an independent social worker. She's also a founder of Impact, a charity that is local in Northampton, and she runs vocational programs for young people and young adults. Again, Nikki is going to tell us more about what she does. So with that, I just want to whet your appetite to join us. Those that are online on YouTube, thank you very much. We might not see you, but we have an audience with us on Zoom. Thank you, ladies, for joining us from different walks of life. But without wasting much time, Dr. Franklin, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the what your thoughts are around educating a woman, and your thoughts around the curriculum of education and opportunities that are available for girls particularly. And I just want to add that 8th of March is Women's Day, so that's why we are focused on women and the girl child. But I know that I want to know something about boys too. So Sabina, you talk about yourself and let us know what your thoughts are.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So thank you, Northampton BAME Network, for inviting me to speak at this important conference. And I'm so honored to be here today with all of you. So just a little about me. My name is Sabine, and I am a born and raised New Yorker from New York City. And for a very long time, I wanted to visit the UK. And I had a chance in the summer of 2007 where I did a study program in Cambridge for a few weeks. Since then, I have always wanted to return. And I did in 2016 when I was accepted for a PhD program at the University of Westminster in London. So why England? I think that I had the same romantic visions when, a British person tells me they always wanted to come to New York City. In the media and arts, both are represented as multicultural and highly dynamic societies where it is a fun and exciting place to be. And that is true to an extent. So I begin with this because overall I enjoyed being in the UK. I met a lot of great people that will stay in my life. And engaging in social and political life in the UK has actually made me more politically and civically engaged back here in the United States. So my perspective today is on institutionalized racism in education, is a perspective from higher education. And I will try to add a different dimension to what we see in primary and secondary level education. That is because for those of you who have children enrolled in schools or are working in schools, you are engaging with staff and administrators who were trained at universities like my alma mater, institutions that are predominantly led by older white male staff who have a very different worldview and philosophy on education. They have trained generations of teachers and school administrators, write educational policy, and generally have shaped pedagogy as a discipline. In fact, I am trained and qualified in higher educational teaching through the UK Higher Education Academy, but my pedagogy training did not address racial barriers in education. And I think these are important now in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and how that has affected learning and teaching. So I'll start off by giving some background in academia. So there is a lot of talk about equality and diversity in higher education. And in fact, the student body has more Black, Asian, and ethnic minority students today than they did, say, about 20 years ago. However, there is still an attainment gap between BAME students and white students. And those teaching in the institutions are predominantly white. So many BAME students do not see a role model for themselves to continue on to postgraduate degrees, and less so to a PhD program. So that is the first flaw about equality and diversity initiatives in higher education. It mainly focuses on recruiting students from diverse backgrounds because there is a financial incentive for the institutions to increase enrollment. However, there lacks that incentive to diversify and recruit academics of color. Not to mention, although there are resources to recruit more students of color, they do not dedicate resources to tackle racism on campus. So the outcome of this is that we invite people of color into hostile spaces where they are marginalized and provide a safe harbor for racist actors because they are rarely held accountable. And that is what we see across the student body from undergraduate to doctoral researchers. There were some notable examples in the last few years, such as the case of Elizabeth Sawyer, who was racially abused at De Montfort University and subsequently suspended by the university. So why did that happen? How is it that someone can report such abuse through the channels of the institution and end up suspended? Diversity is not enough. We need proactive anti-racist policies and measures that will dismantle white supremacy on campuses in the UK. Now, as for doctoral students, doing a PhD is essentially the training grounds for academia. So it reveals a lot about the industry, including its insecure work environment, and thus how important mentoring and supervision is in order to have a career in academia afterwards. A 2017 study by US researcher David Brunsna and his colleagues describe it as surviving in academic waters, where your supervision experience as a PhD student can make the difference between sinking, treading, or swimming. Likewise, British researcher Jason Arde also found that many Black and students of color struggle to find a supervisor who is knowledgeable and interested in their topic of research. So remember how I said earlier that the discipline is predominantly led by white male professors who might have a different worldview and philosophy than a person from a Black or Asian background? Well, imagine being a student seeking a supervisor to study the effects of racism in education. Depending on where you are, this could be a difficult task, but it is crucial to sinking, treading, or swimming. I started out in a department that did have some PhD students of color, although when I began, I was the only Black PhD researcher and supervised by 3 white supervisors. One of the supervisors, who was a white male who had no expertise in African studies, ended up leading the supervision efforts, even though he was not my primary supervisor. My breaking point with this supervision arrangement was when I was submitting draft chapters for an internal assessment that would determine if I'd continue on in the program. He suggested that I bring in, and I quote, the Africa content later on in my thesis, such as a chapter 4 or 5. And why not? That is his worldview, where a student reading African studies and politics need not discuss in depth African politics and governance. Just stick to the Eurocentric materials on politics, and that would be fine. Except that it was not fine. I actually did not pass my internal assessment, which meant that I did not upgrade to PhD candidacy at the end of my second year like I was supposed to. So academia is supposed to be an environment for freedom of knowledge and debate. However, challenging Eurocentric views of academics, in my experience, hardly ends up well. As a Black woman, you are stereotyped as angry or irrational and are usually marginalized. So the good news is I did get new supervisors and I had a much better experience. However, the institution never acknowledged that I was poorly supervised in my first 2 years. Rather, it was explained away as a change of topic or something. I think the only saving grace I had at that time was that I was a self-funded student, so I leveraged a financial incentive that the university needs to keep me. Now, the second problem with equality and diversity initiatives is that it's not inclusive of diverse intellectual perspectives. So not only do we socially marginalize people of color on campus, but we also marginalize their knowledge production. So again, going back to that statement of who leads the discipline, as a researcher, we are trained to reference and cite from, and I quote, the key thinkers. This often means underciting women and ethnic minority scholars. This type of training was what almost got me in trouble with upgrading. So because research is never completely unbiased, this practice does not always create good research. since we need different perspectives. Instead, it maintains that intellectual superiority is within an exclusive group. Furthermore, this exclusive group is influencing pedagogy, training standards, educational policy, and politics. So this actually relates now to the questions that the moderator gave us. So working backwards here, starting with that third question, what changes are needed in the curriculum and in educational practice? How do we achieve that? Well, we need curriculum changes in the places where we train the teachers and principals or headmasters. So for example, how are the student teachers engaging with critical race theory and its application in education? Is this applied in every school? And does policy support this? So, a few months ago, The Guardian reported that anti-racist pedagogy might be in danger due to the UK's government's review of teaching materials in schools. There was a concern raised by some educational specialists that they were targeting anti-racist material and literature. And I can share this link with you to that article in the chat function afterwards if you want to read it on your own. We need more anti-racist pedagogy, and one way to achieve this is to advocate for it. Today, what we are doing with this panel is a good start in the right direction. I hope that after this event ends, there will be continued engagement, organizing, and mobilizing in the communities to push schools and councils on a type of educational experience you want for your children. On to the second question, if we educate women, do we educate the family? I think that has always rang true as women disproportionately take on caregiving roles for their children, such as helping them with homework. But now with COVID-19 and much of the learning taking place at home, more women find themselves, tutoring their children. However, I caution that there are disparities between class and racial backgrounds. Single mothers and working mothers are having a much more difficult time with this, especially if they are a frontline worker. So many women have dropped out of the workforce this year, and including in academia, we have also seen less women submit research for publishing in 2020. So there also needs to be policies on supporting women who have to stay at home to help with caregiving. I'm not too familiar on what is being done in the UK now to do this to counteract COVID-19. But in the long term, it is a big problem if we have women dropping out of the labor market. And finally, what are the opportunities for BAME girls and women in higher education? At my alma mater, the average law student, for example, was female and from a South Asian background. So this is the predominant type of person who is earning a law degree. And at the time, my role at the law school was actually to help law students gain employability skills so they could enter the law field to become successful lawyers. So I'd say that educational opportunities have opened up, especially in the last couple decades, but we need to improve the institutional structures so that BAME girls and women can succeed, particularly in the areas of mentorship, academic or professional development, as many of these students do not have a peer network at home, say, for instance, to help them get an internship. And finally, a university mission that is anti-racist and led by trained anti-racist staff members. So
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sabina. We'll come back to you. And that's really a great introduction in terms of looking at it very specifically at bringing to mind the issue of higher education. And on that, and we will come back, I think you've touched on really important issues around equality and diversity, marginalization, but also who owns the literature that we are using, and who is receiving it, and what you started with about mentoring, I think, is really important. Marianne, what was your take on what's been said? And if you could introduce the next speaker, please.
Thank you, Anne. It's so much information we've been given there. I think we will need to go back and just break it down for ourselves. But one of the key thing is about the curriculum itself. It's about what is being taught and what is being left out. One of the things I know in terms of history is, as much as there is a curriculum, there's also the option for teachers not to teach certain things. And we need to get teachers to be comfortable to have the candid conversations, to go to areas, especially with history, slavery and colonialism, and all those subjects where people are really uncomfortable to talk about. And I think teachers need to be taught how to address these issues and how to teach these issues. But then we need to get the representation right as well for teachers. So I'm not going to take so much time. I'm going to move on to the next speaker. Thank you, Sabine, for that. Really, really, really insightful in what you're doing. Our next speaker is going to be Nikki. Is it Nikki?
Yeah, you come in. Nikki, Nike,
Nikki,
as long as the spelling is correct, that is fine.
welcome to the floor. Take your time. We've got, if you could keep it, how long have we got, Anstance?
Yeah, just go for it for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to you if there's any elements that are left out.
Okay. All right then. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this network. I really appreciate it. So my name is Niagara Pedro. I am an independent social worker, and I work primarily within the school sector. So I have worked as a school social worker in the primary schools, in the primary school sector and the secondary school sector. So, and I am also the founder of Impact Now, which is a charity in Northampton that provides support for children and family in the community. So when I got this question, I had to have a sit down with some of my volunteers, because 75% of the volunteers for Impact Now are from the Bain community. So I just felt it would be right for me to hear some of their views on this question, so that I'm not just coming with my own views and ideas on these issues. So so some of their response will be part of what I'll be sharing with you guys this evening. So I'll move on to the first question. The first question was on what are the challenges and what are the opportunities for girls and women from the Bain community in education. So touching first on the challenges, one of the ladies said at times there have been instances whereby you've been made to feel as if you don't fit in through your color or through wearing your natural hair. So a lot of them tend to want to be like their white counterpart by trying to wear wig or trying to do something different with their hair just for them to feel acceptable. And they because they found out that when their natural African Afro hair doesn't get them laughed at, or people just tell them why does your hair look kind of funny? So that kind of affect their self-confidence. So most of them don't feel like they fit in because of that. And there's also the fact that one of the challenges again is that there's not enough role models that girls can relate to. For instance, there are no younger Bain teachers within the schools. I had a friend that is a primary school teacher, and she kind of told me that she found out that when our agency sends her to some of these primary schools to go and work, most of the teachers and teaching assistants their first thought is that she's a teaching assistant. And so when she tells them that she's actually a trained teacher, they kind of feel surprised because they don't, and from there their defense is kind of like up, and they wouldn't like take instructions from her because she feels that when she works in the environment, because, and this is something she feels on a daily basis, moving from school to school, that she kind of feel that she doesn't have, she's not being given the atmosphere to kind of like impart the children the way she would have loved to, because as a Black teacher, she can't really voice her opinion, or for some of the teaching assistants to feel that they can't take instruction from her simply because she's Black. And that is so, that is serving as a disadvantage to some of our BAME children, because if they don't see enough teachers to kind of relate to, it kind of make them feel out of place, because somebody from the same background as themselves will kind of like understand where they are coming from, what their culture is. For example, what I was working in a school once, and then I had to like intervene in a family situation. By me being there, I was able to like get them to understand what the cultural differences are in that particular family, why they can't really treat the children the same way as they would like treat a child from a white family, because the cultural thing, they have to be mindful of that. For instance, most of them don't understand the fact that somebody in the neighborhood that a child calls the auntie, even though it's not the child biological auntie, but is an auntie in their cultural sense, and that person to kind of like take care as like the people from the Bain community, they kind of have a sense of community within themselves, in the sense that it's not only the biological parent that can actually take care of a child, they can have somebody, even though not biologically related to them, taking care of them. But the school on this instance, they don't understand that why is the child calling that person the auntie and uncle, and they kind of felt that the child was lying. And I kind of like, that is not the instance, that is not the case, because this is how culturally it is. Anybody older than you within the same cultural setting, you kind of relate to the person as an auntie or uncle, and the person like, that is there. So I think that is one of the challenges that we face. And also, uh, there's even though a child is in a class and they kind of say that there's equal opportunity for the child to like actively participate in class, it is actually in reality not so, because as a result of their reduced sense of belonging and low self-esteem, a child from the Bain background uh, will not feel that they can actively participate in class. And then oftentimes female Black females are often being seen as being bold and confident, and that is termed to be something else. And so a teacher might kind of feel the need to shut them down if they kind of appear to be bold and confident. So that is one of the challenges there as well, the that the children face. And so uh, a practical example that one of my volunteers gave me is the fact that she feels, for instance, when she was doing her GCSE, she was predicted C's and D's, even though she was a solid B grade student, and she ended up achieving 11 A's and B's. That is the kind of inequality and the challenges that Bain children face in school. So moving on to the opportunities, I think there is the opportunity for us to, as a community, to raise more awareness within the educational sectors, whereby training for staff can be made. And I think if 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 the schools are educated and trained about the different ethnicity and the cultures, it would like make it a better place for children in the Bain community. And and also there is opportunity for for organizations to cater for girls and young women. For example, we have the tampon fund that focus primarily on like opportunities for women and girls. So if we could have something created for being black Bain girls and women, that would be a very good thing. that will support them, provide scholarship for them, that would be something that would be welcome. So if I'm moving on to the second question now. It is said that if you educate women, you educate the nation. That is very true, because women are natural caregivers. And then you find out that in a family whereby the 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 highest person is a female, there will be a sense of order in that family, because is the patriarchy of the family is a female, for instance. There is the sense of belonging, and the fact that people will feel the need to like fall in line. And then you find out that in family environment whereby the woman is educated, there is a greater chance that the child as well will go as high, if as as the mother has gone, because the woman is the primary caregiver. She's the one that can actively advocate and push the child to be the best they can. I'm not saying men can't do the same, but just that they have other priorities, and women are the one that like push them. They are the one that will tell them to like uh, do their own work, support them with their own work, like take them to school most of the time, pick them more from school. They have more time with the children than the men do have. So 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 if women are educated, it makes for a better society. And then also, if education will empower the girls and women to eventually contribute to their families and contribute to the society and the economy. And then if young Bain children see educated women in various roles in the society, it would enable them to see that they can also be the best they can in this field. They can go as high as whatever they want to be. I had the saying before. There was a WhatsApp post that I came across once that said you shouldn't tell your female child that they can be the wife of a president. You tell them they can be the president, because there's nothing wrong with the men be the husband of a president. So that means a woman can go as high as they can if they see other role models in the society. And then because there is naturally, if you look at the population of the world, there's more women than men. So even with that alone, that means women have the greater chance to make this society a better society if given half the chance they were given to men. Even in the workplace, there's this glass cylinder that, although they say that the world is the better place now, the cylinder is still there, whereby women struggle to like break that. So the more empowered women become, I think we can go on to like eventually break out of that glass cylinder. So the third question talks about what changes are needed in the curriculum and how we can achieve this. The first one will be for the institutions to be educated. Like Sabina has said, there's that racism in education, in the higher education. If so, the changes need to be that they need to be educated right from the grand low to the highest person. They need to be educated about these cultural differences. They need to have more cultural sensitivity, and then also need to be like they also need to be like incentive made specifically for Bain students, which will enable them to be able to like achieve, to like take part in more opportunities. And there's also the need for more representation of Sri Lankan Bain female figures in the classroom, particularly in areas of history. So in area of history, sociology, and science, when they are doing these curriculum, there's nothing that says they can't talk about a Black strong person or somebody from the Asian community in history. So if we have more of those changes within the curriculum, I think that would really be great. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. That was really good. I think you touch on the kind of the same issues about anti-racist literature, knowledge, and how sometimes the literature marginalizes, but also cultural competences for teachers. You also talk about the issue of the glass ceiling. Now we're going to go to Esther Mcintosh, because she's been head teacher. She's broken through some of those ceilings, and she's had to work with a team that probably had issues that you've kind of touched on around cultural incompetence and also challenge some of the discrimination within the team. So Esther, do you want to pick up the conversation and staying with the themes that we've talked about so far and the questions, please?
Thank you. Very happy to be a part of this team today, seeing so many powerful Black women in their field. It's just a pleasure, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. Yes, I think Marianne had said about, what can we do about COVID-19, and it's still with us and perhaps will be with us in one form or another. I think this discussion today, this conversation today, allows for a conversation to address an education system that is, in my view, broken. And I think COVID-19 has brought to the fore lots of issues to do with gaps in learning, where the gaps are more significant, be it your Black child and Black boys, how it's affecting them, white working class children, the haves and the have-not budgets, so much, entitlement in terms of the technology, homes, housing, all of the issues have been thrown up by this pandemic. And I think it represents a real opportunity, if there is the will, if the will is there, locally, nationally, and I would say globally, because that's how we're all having to think right now, to really look at what is being taught in institutions of education, schools and higher education, universities and such. I am an educator. I'm passionate about education. I'm listening to, I listen to you, Sabine, and Nikki, Nike, and I'm sitting on my, I'm having to, bite my tongue and kind of sit on my hands, because I everything that you're saying is from the research to the practical outworking of it. I've experienced it all. So as a black teacher and a head teacher, what I feel my greatest opportunity was to be visible. Hey, I'm Black. Hey, I'm a teacher. Hey, I'm leading a school. That visibility allowed me to inspire the children that I led, their parents, the governing body, the local authority, other head teachers. I was always the minority in the room. And at the school that I led, it was predominantly white, which has had its own issues, but that was my experience. That ability to be visible meant that I was challenging stereotypes about who a teacher is and about who a head teacher is. It's still the case. I read recently that 46% of all schools in England have no BAME teachers. Now, what the visibility that I had as a Black teacher and a head teacher allowed me to do was to have a voice and to own the narrative. So in that classroom, when I spoke about any subject matter, I didn't have to wait for Black History Month, because here's a Black teacher talking to you about maths, English, science. So for instance, an example would be in areas of algebra, or who invented algebra? Is it white and European? No. The zero, where did that come from? We know that the Romans had the X for 10. Who invented the zero? That's from India, the Indian subcontinent. So I was all the time bringing in a cultural perspective to every subject. So I don't think that there is a day or a month for Black history. History is Black. It involves everything that every community has contributed. So being visible gave me a voice to own the narrative. That is important. If 46% of schools are not having BAME teachers, who is owning the narrative? It stands to reason who is. Because if you're not there, by default, someone else has the narrative. And that is a self-perpetuating prophecy that we're seeing again and again. So if we're going to challenge it, one of the opportunities or one of the challenges we've got to look, and this is where policy and practice has to change. So in terms of recruiting teachers, we have got to get more Black and ethnic minority women and men, but we're talking about women, into the classroom, because the narrative that we bring will be from a unique perspective, with a unique set of perspectives. One would expect that each of us are different. So where is the Black experience? Where is the Black perspective? That is missing. If we are talking about training and training teachers, my experience as well, it's been referred to already, was again the only white Black teacher trainee in my cohort. My concerns range around, if we think of training in terms of doors, and we need to look then at barriers to entry. So yes, you start at door one, you are accepted, assuming that everything goes well, onto your teacher's training course, however you do that. But because of the hoops that you have to jump through, there is no guarantee that you're coming out at the end. So we may need to look at the percentage of Black and ethnic minority teachers who enter one door and look at that percentage and match them. If 30% applied, why is it only 10% coming out at the other end? What has happened between door one and that final door? And that was, I mean, as Sabina's referred to already, you know, had she not had the wherewithal to continue her education, PhD studies, she would have been a statistic, entered but didn't finish. And that happens, I think, far too often, and no one's looking at it. We're just saying, where are Black teachers? Where are you know, but that something's happened between the entry and the entrance, and that needs to be looked at. It needs to be looked at policy level. That needs to be addressed. And then once you're in the door, then we need to look at discrimination in terms of progression to senior roles. So I started as a class teacher. I, at my, when you look at how you're doing with your job, I aspired to be a leader of a group. I think it was a science leader. I applied to do that. And again, the pushback I got was, no, you stay in the classroom, you don't need to do that. So had I not been determined to move forward and to push for that, again, you're not going into those senior roles, and those discriminatory experiences in terms of progressing to senior roles, again, needs to be addressed. Who we ask to address it, we cannot leave it to the system, I suppose this is where, Sabine, your research comes in. It needs to affect practice and policy. So we need to look at the discrimination in terms of progression to senior roles and also pay and progression. So, you know, is that black head teacher or that black teacher getting comparable pay to their colleagues? That needs to be addressed also. In terms of teaching, what I find is, or what I did find is, at primary level, your Black and African and children of color are points ahead in the key areas of reading, maths, comprehension. Something starts to happen between the final year of primary school and the first 2 or 3 years of secondary education. That child, boy or girl, black boy or black girl I'm talking about, starts to lose confidence in their identity and in their ability, not for want of problems with themselves, but in terms of how they are perceived. Now, if they are 46% of all schools do not have BAME teachers, and you are grappling with issues to do with identity, which we know around about 11, 12, that's when it starts, and you see no one like you, and you're being challenged, and what happens is our black girls sometimes are seen as conforming. So they have the pencil cases and everything's nice at their desk. That bodes well for any teacher, a black teacher or white teacher, because they're not causing any problems. Your black boy will cause problems, not inherently, but more likely, it's likely to happen. That's not the problem of the black boy either. I'm just saying there are issues around identity for both the black child, the black boy and the black girl. And if we are having schools with no BAME teachers, then that is all kind of combining to create a crisis for the child. And so the parents says, come on, just get on with it. Do what the teacher says, you know, do your work, get it homework handed in, and all will be well. But that child knows it's more than that. They are experiencing it on the ground. So those are some of the issues I want to draw attention to. Yes, if you educate women, you educate the nation. Kofi Annan, he said to educate girls is to reduce poverty. So there's an economic incentive to educate women. If you educate a man, you educate one person. If you educate a woman, the nation prospers. 50%, roughly 50% of the world's population are women. That's half of the population. So there should be an economic incentive for educating women, because of course the country's productivity is increased and you are fueling economic growth. So the incentives are there, it's just the will and to make it happen. So that is an area I think we need to consider. Educating women has an economic incentive for us nationally, locally, and globally. I've just looked at some of the notes that I wrote down, and I think Nike, is it Nike? I hope I've said that right. Something that you referenced to. Again, this visibility and owning the narrative. I remember in the classroom, I wanted to look at the continent of Africa, and bearing in mind, most people still think of Africa as a country, not a continent. So that was important for my children to know. And remember, they're predominantly white children. They must know that Africa is a continent. And this wasn't during Black History Month either. This is wherever it's needed to be known. The other thing I did was I put up a series of images on the interactive whiteboard of iconic skyscrapers. And I asked the children, where is that in the world? England, they said, America. I said, that's Africa. No, that cannot be Africa. let me just check myself. It was a country in Africa. The children were aghast. Why were they aghast? Because the images that are perpetuated about the continent is that it's always hands are out, begging, needing money, not sophisticated enough to have skyscrapers and iconic buildings. It was important for me, being a Black and ethnic Caribbean teacher, to challenge that narrative. I was owning the narrative in that classroom, and I was determined that my children would have a chance to see the world as it is, not as it has been written in order to subjugate groups of people based on their color, their ethnicity, and their gender. So that was important to me. When it comes to the curriculum, I think there's a lot to be done in this area. I find that, again, there's a weariness of our kids in terms of education, because, and I think there's a reason for that. I think that the curriculum being subject-based and overloaded and quite theoretical, I think that's worked for an era of industrialization. As I said last time, we're moving out of that into a new era, and I think the curriculum needs to be looked at. Hardly any attention is given to competencies and skills. That needs to be looked at. The curriculum textbooks that we look at, they have gender depictions of women that are out of date and should not be there. So we need to challenge what's in the textbook in terms of gender. We need to challenge what's in our textbooks in terms of people of color. So much needs to be looked at. The pedagogy that was referenced to, the assessment needs to be looked at as well. There are changes in the labor market, reorganization of work worldwide. These are big issues. And I think if we are willing to take on some of these big issues, addressing them face on, we can see an education system that is fit for purpose for Black children, Black boys, Black girls, and every ethnicity on the planet. I believe that. I believe it's possible, but it's down to the will. You know, it's good to have these panels. I hope the right people are listening, apart from these talented set of Black powerful women. I hope that the right people are listening, people who want to engage in policy and practice and change for the better, so we become an inclusive nation. You know, if talking about the rollout of the vaccine, I think that, you know, there's a lot of politics around that as well. But if one nation kind of, they have the vaccine and the other nations are not properly vaccinated, if one suffers, if they succeed and the rest of the nations don't, then we all get pulled down. So we all need to be lifted up, and that applies to education. The global and the local and the national level is suffering for lack of inclusivity, bringing everyone to the table who needs to be at the table, and not just being at the table, but your voice is received equally, eye to eye. No women in the background. Yeah. I think I'll stop.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we can listen and hear you keep talking on that. I think one thing that stands out for me, and I'll go back to Marianne, is that, and I think all of you are saying the same thing, that there is how do institutions discreetly look at what's happening in a student's life and the transitions that happen, and when they fall out or when they're struggling in that life cycle of being a student, I think that's really important, because it comes back to being really person-centered for that particular child, but it affects every Black child. So if we know that, okay, at 11, and this is my experience as well, that my daughter comes back and says, I think I don't like my smile anymore. And then when you go in and you dig down, she's like, no, I've been told that my lips are too big. And you're like, I'm dealing with that now. So you then start, okay, how do you educate? So as parents, we have all those, the cycle of a child, you see them confident, but then you start seeing them dropping. We need to be really in tune with that, and bring in models ourselves, because sometimes parents are probably the worst model when the kids are in your house. They become, great model afterwards. But bring in as many models as you can. We've got different people here on the panel. Tap into those people, introduce them. Nikki talked about aunties. What type of aunties are you bringing into the home that will become models for your children? Marianne, you pick it up and introduce the next speaker as well.
So much more. Esther, I liked what you said being at the table. It reminds me of my favorite quote that I keep on sharing with this group every time we meet together. If you're not at the table, you are on the menu. So if we are not there, we need to be there in the first place. So my biggest challenge right now is that if we do not have a representation of BAME teachers, so that means we are not at the table. That means then we are on the menu. That's the point. Now, my biggest concern right now with COVID is that we are going to have teachers determine the exam grades for our children. So, and we have the majority of the teachers who cannot relate to their students, and yet they're going to be determining the grades for our children. Don't you think there's a problem there? There's going to be a huge problem there, because it's going to be, like it or not, sometimes it's about interactions between the teachers and the students. It's going to impact how the grades are going to be graded. It's going to impact the future of our children. It's going to impact a generation to come. If there's anything we've learned about COVID, is that we are as strong as our weakest link. That we need to make sure the whole nation, the whole community, the whole society needs to know the working class child, the BAME child, is equally important in terms of education. And if we miss that, COVID has taught us something. You cannot live in isolation. We are all interlinked, and we are only as strong as the strongest link. We are only as strong as a community, as a society, as a nation, when we are all strong. So, having said that, one of the Northampton ladies, who we cannot talk about Northampton without mentioning her, Marcia Walker, welcome.
I've unmuted. Good afternoon, everyone, and a huge thank you for the invitation to be here this afternoon. I've agreed with everything people have said, and as the elder in the group, I feel that I'm auntie to all the speakers and all the people gathered. So I expect, if I'm addressed this afternoon, to be addressed as auntie. I know you're all adults, but I'm the oldest one here, I think. Okay, so I can become aunt. And I am a child of the Caribbean because of my age. I was born in Jamaica. Very proud of that, and came here when I was 9. And my Jamaicanness is increasing as I get older. And I'm a bit older than Danielle, she knows that. Not a lot, but I'm older than her. So, Esther, just to pick up a point, it's going to be really interesting to find out which 46% of schools, I'm hazarding a guess, have not got Black representation. I'm hazarding a guess that those schools, secondary particularly, will be producing the businessmen of the future, the teachers of the future, the doctors and nurses, that percentage, quite a bit of it, will be in areas that are, throwing people out into those really important areas that's been spoken about this afternoon. And the other thing is, I've always been a minority. I can't remember the last time I was a majority as a Black woman. But it has meant in my teaching life that has been quite an asset, because I've made it that way. It's been my choice to make it an asset. And I want to start by saying that women as a whole face many challenges, yes? So as women, because sometimes I'm sure there are those of us sitting around thinking, you know what, I've got an issue because I happen to be a woman, but when you add the Black and brown layers to it, it really takes on a different look. And I'm going to use poetry and anecdotes, and I'm going to go back to my cultural roots, because this is what would happen in Africa or Jamaica. You're telling a story, but you've got to find some, story in the past, a bit like watching Miss Marple. She can always compare it to some little boy who lives in the village. But for me, this whole mix reminds me of making coconut oil. This was a task I had with my grandmother on a Wednesday, grating the coconut to make the coconut oil to go to market Friday and Saturday. And so you've got a nice mix there. You've got the coconut, you've picked it, it's great. These are our young people, isn't it? You've got them, they're fabulous. And they can make a nice mix. So the coconut is grated, it's put on, give it a good stir. So you're stirring your young people all the time, giving them knowledge. You don't realize it. And it's not all parents. Remember, we're talking about a village here, So somebody said, make sure you choose the right aunties and uncles, to enter into your life. So they're giving that young person a nice stir, and you're stirring that coconut mix, and then you let it simmer, and you're enabling that child, to be picking things up. They may be in school, but remember that school is only a part of their lives. And if you work it out percentage-wise, it's a huge percentage they're not there. So all this is simmering. And then lastly, you let it settle, and you skim the oil off, and you put it into a nice bottle, and you go to market to sell. And that is what we should be doing with our children, isn't it? We're allowing them to bubble, to simmer, to, and then we sort of pick off the bit that's really going to make them wonderful and achieve. And then you put them out into that world. That market becomes the world, the society in which they're going to grow up. And I just sense that sometimes we lose part of that journey, but that's not our fault, because we're so intense about making sure they have things, making sure school is working, making sure all of that is going on, that actually we end up losing sight of what mix is going on and all of that. As I say, not our fault, because it really ought not to be that we're having to work so hard to help our young people achieve. But like many things, they all have the right ingredients, don't they? They're not born harmful. They have those ingredients which are so important. And I love the idea of COVID being an opportunity for change. This is a time when you're examining things, when you're looking at things, you're sort of thinking, what has gone wrong? All the disadvantages have lured its head for the whole education and other societies' problems. It's COVID has just said, you know what, let me show you what you're about. These are all the inequalities that's going on all over the place, medical, educational, and so on. And for me, it's a very useful thing. My grandson is edging his way into the room, and I'm going to chase him away. He wants me to do homework. So just say a quick hello This is Cartel, my grandson, and bye-bye, see you soon. Okay. Sorry about that, but if he doesn't see his nana, he gets a bit anxious. So thank you. So I refer to that beautiful poem by Maya Angelou to actually try and create a situation about challenges. Yeah, challenges and opportunities almost melt into each other. You know, there's a kind of synergy between them. You know, you can say something is a challenge, but actually it's an opportunity. You know, if I see that isn't working, how can I overcome? And Maya Angelou wrote this beautiful poem, just a bit of it. Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. You know, and the four of us that have spoken this afternoon, something's happened, hasn't it? Because we have risen. It didn't mean that the journey was easy in that rising at all. And sometimes, I don't know what happens, but I think the way we rise, people think it's been easy for us. You know, they think, oh, look at four of them. They've done all right. You know, what's the problem? Maybe the problem is for us to work out how we've achieved that. And we can't totally write a book about it, but there will be anecdotes about our journeys all of us have been on that makes it that we can say, you know what, don't go down that road. You know, perhaps this might be better. And it's those. Esther, you were talking about, you know, being that role model. I asked a couple of my students, having way back in the 80s, so I still see them, which is a good story to tell. And I said, what difference did I make in your life? One of them, when I pass away, is going to do my eulogy, Eva Dyer. I'll make it known. Because she came out of a family, you know, they would say not overeducated, but didn't she do well? Deputy sub-editor for the independent newspaper and so on. And the challenge, and she said, do you know what, Mrs. Walker, when you were at school, you just dressed well, which made us as Black students very proud of you. You stood your ground, but you also, we could tell you had friends, teachers who were friends, and that to them was very important. And it brings me on to a very important word, the dolphins. I learned it from a vicar who was doing a presentation, who said, all of us have dolphins in our lives. Those dolphins that carry you along and drop you off at some point because you don't need them anymore. Some are Black, some are white, some are Asian, and so on. It's a beautiful mix of people. And what we need to do is recognize those dolphins, because you never know when they need to become an auntie or an uncle in our lives. I realize time is going on and I'm sure there are questions, but there have been things in my life that I've loved that have brought me into culture. And one of them was in the 70s, creating supplementary school, looking at where we're failing, what is happening, setting up the West Indian Parents Association supplementary school, where we could teach English, but with books from the Caribbean or from Africa, or get the maths book in. And it was, you know, from home, and the children could see pictures of people there. And it was an opportunity as well for schools to recommend young people to us that they felt needed a little push and a little go. We've hit upon academies versus local authority. And that creates its own problems. Years ago, we used to be able to collect statistics to find out where young people are in the whole thing. And we were able to have conferences, seminar, homework clubs, both for Black or Asian, or, you know, a mixture of young people to meet their needs. And bumping into a young man the other day who's of an age, and he just said, do you know what was good about those, Mrs. Walker? And he calls Danielle my white friend, you know, the white lady with the blonde hair. He said, it was so good that we found people who cared about us enough to look after us. And the curriculum can do with a big change, a hugest change all around for a multitude of people. But when I first became an advisor, there was a lady called Rashida Spencer. She was an inspector, and she created a document called the Aid Memoir. And schools are supposed to do checklists. Have you got black teachers? What are you teaching? What's your curriculum like? What does it look like? Way back in the 80s. And one of the things it said at the end of the Aid Memoir, if you do all these things that we are suggesting, it will benefit all children. And I held on to it. Rashida was a lovely Asian lady. She knew how to manage her staff. And yes, it is good to have women. It is good to have women who may not bear children, but women who bring along those people who are going to make a difference, who contribute in a way that is so unusual. They're always looking for a better future, often remaining silent, but still achieving.
Thank you so much, Auntie Mosia. And it's really nice. You say that it's very rare that you're in a place where you are in the majority. Today, I think we can safely say
Yes.
Danielle is in the minority. So, but she's our Auntie Danielle. We all know her. But I just want to say and acknowledge that we may run out of time, but I will come back to June Elizabeth, because she lifted up something that we want to know a little bit about. But before I go to June, Neelam, Asian, I know we were supposed to have someone to represent that perspective. What is your take? Because yes, we're talking about, we've got Black ladies who will identify as Afro-Caribbean or African, and what is your take on what's going on? And I know Bangladeshi communities have their own issues and different, but we are all women. So just comment on what you've heard a little bit about.
Right, thank you very much. I think all the speakers spoke eloquently with a lot of knowledge and confidence, which was really good to hear. I particularly enjoyed Sabine's stats she shared with us, because those are the things which will help us to influence changes, because without that, it's very difficult to change things. I have worked in education, and I think, oh, Morsia, did you want to go in first? Or no, can I finish?
Afterwards, okay. After you finish.
Thank you. I think for me, because I have worked in education and with primary and secondary schools, and what I found was the aspiration, the raising of the aspiration was the most important thing which was missing. Which was missing. And I think that's something so easy to be fixed from home. Because the statistics, when I was working in education about 10, 15 years ago, 15% of the time children spend in school and 85% of the time spent at home. And therefore, we as parents are more powerful in influencing how our children are really going to achieve and raise their aspirations, support them. Because I tell you, I'm a parent, I've had my daughters and my son go through the education system where they, this ignorant mind, they will say, oh, you are a Paki. And I remember feeling so proud of my daughter. She was like 4 or 5 in primary, very early age. And she stood her ground and she said to whoever shouted at her, saying, I'm not a Paki, I'm a Hindu. And she came home all shaken and said, oh, Mummy, somebody called me this, and was that okay? And I said, good, I'm proud of you. And there were times when she'll come home and she'll say to me, oh, Mummy, I was born here, why am I this color? And I sat her down and I would say to her, sweetheart, listen, brown is beautiful. People pay a lot of money for these sun creams lie in the sun, under the sun, on the beach. Sometimes they are burnt as a result. And then they come home from holiday and say, oh, I'm same color as you, almost. So be proud of who you are, what you have, because God has made us different colors to bring the variety. We are all different human beings, which is very, very important to acknowledge that nobody is higher or the lower. But what is important and interesting is something Esther was saying, that primary school, our children do okay, good, well, better, but something clicks as soon as they are in the secondary school. You know what? People like to, I find in this country more that the systems like to put people in boxes. By putting them in boxes, they feel easier. And you know, it's like everybody is painted in the same color. It's just not possible. There's no such thing as one fits all, you know, and it's such a shame that they come across an Asian face or a black face, and without actually getting to know those individuals, assumptions, negative sometimes, assumptions are made because media doesn't help. Media portrays, you know, I remember seeing something when I first time came to UK in 81, I saw something on BBC One and I'm saying, oh, no, 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 this isn't about India. No, 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 this cannot be about India. But BBC has had a tendency to only highlight, like Esther was saying about an icon about Africa, you know, so it's just interesting how the media, the society, the systems insist on portraying us. But my main thing is we cannot allow any of these systems or the individuals to win and dictate from not succeeding our young people, because 85% of the time they are in our custody, and therefore we have a lot of time to influence and a lot of time to nurture them and give them that confidence that they do well. I have a lot more to say, but I will stop because time is short. Thank you.
I know. Auntie Marcia, will come back to you. Just hold your hand. We will come back to you because you will have the last words as well. So I know, June, you were holding a book. Do you want to comment on
okay.
on
you don't need to
you
call
heard?
me Auntie June. You don't need to call me Auntie June. I was the first black girl born in Northampton. I went to all-white school and I was the head girl of all-white school. I was the first black police officer in Northamptonshire. Okay, and I was a double qualified nurse. I've worked in the school systems for over 40 years, presenting Black history. I was invited in London and I do it on Zoom. The book that I was showing was Northampton West Indian Parents Association. I've got a copy for Marcia. I keep telling I've got her a copy. And Marcia wrote her awareness. This was 40 years ago, this is 1983, right? Because of the inequality of what was happening to black children. Yeah, so my late uncle and Marcia were very instrumental in Northamptonshire West Indian Parents Association Saturday school, which I used to help out as well. So I just want to say I was called into school when I came back from London. My son went to the local school and he came home and he said, what is a packy, mum? Right? Because he used to be fair looking skin and they were calling him a packy. So I realized I've got to go into the school to work. And I followed them from primary school to the upper school and I could see the changes. But what I want to say, it's been an excellent, conference. And with what Neelam was saying, influencing changes, as parents, we are powerful. I remember the day Neelam came to Military Road, Link College to work. Remember that, Neelam?
Yes.
And then she worked in the library. So we go back a long time, just like I'll go back with Marcia. And as Marcia says, Neelam says we're powerful parents, we've got power. And Marcia says, sometimes we've got to keep our eye on the mixing, yeah? And Marion said, we're strong as the weakest link, right? And then the cultural sensitivity, right, that Nikki spoke about. And I'll just close with what she said about respect, right? I live in a cul-de-sac, and some of the little children came and said to me a few years ago, why do you call Uncle Charlie? And he's a white man and he's not your uncle. So I said, well, when I was growing up, it don't matter what color you were, there weren't many black people about, but there's a thing called respect. You couldn't call a big person by their first name. So the reason why I went on, and I've just done 20 years as a health counsellor, rather than change my vocation as a nurse to a teacher, when I was working at the school, as I closed, I remember Mr. Render, he'd been teaching for 25 years. And I was Mrs. Smith then, and he said he was leaving to go and drive taxis in the summer. I said, you're not retirement. He said, I told a little boy off, he was very naughty. And in the morning, his dad came in front of the class and he thumped me in my face. He said, are you Mr. Render? And he thumped me in my face. And that made me make the choice, instead of teaching as a third profession, to go into counselling. And I said to Mr. Render, in the Old Testament, it says an eye for an eye. In the New Testament, it said turn the other cheek, and I don't want to do either. So I respect all you teachers. I go in as a presenter and they love me coming into the schools, and I do it voluntary as well, right? They love me coming into the schools and I love doing it. I love presenting Black History, not just Black History Month, all through the year. But I take my hat off to all you educators that are on the case. And that's what I want to close by saluting you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Melita, I know you have something to say. I can feel it. Melita, you can just say something really quickly. And others, please feel free to just say something or ask. We should round up in 5 minutes, really. And then we'll go back to the speakers. So anyone can, put your camera on if I know that you want to say something. Yeah, so Melita.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Good afternoon to you. I tell you, I'm sitting here and I'm so enjoying this. And I've got so much, I've written some stuff down and I can't go through all of them. But I'll start with Esther. I would just want to say to Esther, I totally agree with your Black History Month. Because as far as I'm concerned, Black history is every single second of the day, just as any other history. So it hasn't got to be taught at a particular time of the year. Black teachers, as a portfolio older assistant to schools, I have visited many schools, and because of COVID, since last year, I wasn't able to go into none. But I have challenged because I've been in schools and there's no Black teachers. And I ask why there isn't any Black teachers, especially men. Because as one of the speakers said, we need men in our school, especially Black men, so that our youngsters can see somebody like themselves. Because some of them are coming from home or it's just mom, but they need to see somebody else with some authority that they can look up to. And I totally agree with that. The curriculum, well, what can I say about the curriculum? It needs ripping up and starting again. So I won't even go any further with that one. Marcia, I've got so much in common with you. You spoke about the coconut in Jamaica and your grandmother, and I used to do exactly the same. I used to have to get up in the morning, go and fetch the water for my grandmother to wash the coconut because she was a market trader as well. And, and you said something about, one of your pupils said how well dressed you are at school. And that's something that means so much to me because I'm also from Jamaica, and I used to see teachers dressed like this. And, to me, that's showing children that you need to dress in some form of authority. Everybody can't, teachers can't look the same. Your children has got the uniform on, and you're going to tell a child that you're not wearing your uniform properly, but you look as if you dress as if you're going to put the dustbin out. And, I feel that is wrong. I think that's something that should be changed. Wherever. I love the tick list, what you said about the about ticking things off to say how many Black teachers you've got, how many Asian teachers you've got, and so on and so on. And I, you know, some of these things, you know, it's things that we've taught out, I've thought about, and it's good to see educators here speaking about it. And it's so wonderful to see Black ed teachers, even though we haven't got a lot of them. I mean, I know of 2 people who was teachers and they had to leave the profession because it was made so hard for them. They had to step out of being teachers and doing something else, which is such a shame. And I love our speaker, and I've written down, this is somebody that we need to get in touch with. Is it Sabina Franklin? We'll have to get in touch with you, Sabine, because I would love to listen to you talk again. If you're going to stick around in the UK, we'll definitely speak to you again. I've also put down, you know, to speak to Esther again, because I've got something in mind. I've got this ambition about opening a Black school. And I will need to speak to some of these educators to sit around the table to see how we can go about it. So thank you very much. Thank you so much. I really enjoy this. I forgot to say that. You probably said I should have said who I am. I shouldn't at the beginning. You know, I'm really proud of myself. I was so enthusiastic. I couldn't wait to talk. I'm really proud, and I'm a local councillor, city councillor here in Nottingham, representing the Arboretum ward. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Claire, I'll come back to the speakers. Claire has her hand up. Do you have a question, Claire?
Yes. Mine is, first of all, to say how pleased I am that we are talking about the things we are talking about, because there are lots of issues around race and racism in our schools. And we don't talk about this because it's like there is a taboo. If you speak about it, you might be thought you are. So like Esther said, there are people coming into the school, Black and Asian teachers coming in, and then they exit the other door because they seem to go and inhabit a space that is all white. And so some support mechanism is needed to support those who are, because both the students of color and the teachers of color appear to face a lot of microaggression in schools just because they dare to be there and to say that this is also our space. So I would be very interested, like other people have said, to hear what Sabine would say about how, maybe also in other contexts, how we can break the culture of silence, talk about it as parents and as teachers and wherever we are, so that we don't adopt that official position of as if it's okay. It's not okay. We are not talking about it. We need to talk about it because it's an issue that is permeating every other aspect, no matter how silent we leave it. We have a few people who support, and there are many people who will try to do that, but there is still an issue there that we need to address, and maybe through this forum or anywhere else, it's great we are talking about it. It's just, there is a lot more we need to talk about. So I would like to hear whether there is any way, like Sabine and others would say, how we can actually try to break that silence and say it's okay to talk about it. It's not okay not to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Sabina? You're on mute.
Mute, yes. Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I mean, institutional changes are, you know, it's not easy. And even myself, I'm learning also how to talk about it as well as write about it. So I guess coming from my background, which is an academic background, you know, the first thing I think about as ways to express myself is to publish. Initially, when I did first talk about the experiences of women of color in higher education, I did it with a group. I had 2 other academics you know, co-author a piece with me in The Guardian. And now I'm also publishing for an academic journal, for the Journal of Colorism Studies that's coming out later on this year. So, you know, talking about it and writing about it, I think well, writing about it, I would say would be the first step. But really, I would say is to, you know, don't go at it alone, right? You know, as a group, there's solidarity, there's support, right? So this group right here is a support network, right? So do it together. You know, host another, you know, conference where you talk about something, where you talk about it specifically, and invite those decision makers, you know, your counselors, your MPs, you know, those people in the audience that really need to hear that message. Also in your, if you are going to write about it, your local newspaper in Northampton, your local circulatories, where you can spread your message. So I think, you know, as a group, there's definitely a lot of resources on how to get your voice out there. I don't want to say that it's easy or, you know, that there will necessarily be a welcome, you know, attitude, but it needs to be talked about over and over and over until the message is heard. Look at Black Lives Matter. We have been talking about that since, you know, 2014. And it's only really this year that I think we saw like a growing number of acceptance for people to actually agree and say, okay, yes, I get it. Black Lives Matter, right? So we have to keep talking and talking over and over until that message is honed.
Thank you for that. We're gonna have to wind up, and I know that others might want to say something really quickly, but I'm going back to all the speakers if they can just say the last word. I'll start with Mosia because she had her hand up, and then I'll go to Nikki, and Esther will be the last person, and then Marianne will round it all up. Mosia. Oh, Auntie Mosia.
It's quite all right. I mean, I had loads of notes that I made, but to go back to Neelam's point, which I think I briefly mentioned in my presentation, time spent in school and equate it with time spent out of school is higher. That's the highest number. And things like supplementary school and establishments like that, where young people can gather along with people from their own culture and learn things and share things and have meetings where people like Sabine, you can invite them to meet with parents. You know what I mean? That's the beginning. And in Northamptonshire at one point, we still do, but we had the African Caribbean, the African Supplementary School, Gujarati, Punjabi, really nice cultural mix, where those groups would meet at concerts and things like that and share those common goals. But one of the common goals was how involved can I become as an adult, not necessarily a parent, because parents can't necessarily do everything, but how do I extend my auntyhood or unclehood into different spheres that can then help those young people. Yes, we need more teachers. Yes, we need all sorts of things in that field. But that is not a slow boil, but that's simmering. So it's what we do in between as we build up those numbers in the creative way that Esther was talking about. But yes, I swear by supplementary schools because they were a comfort zone as well. It was a way of sharing information and learning something new.
Okay, thank you so much, Mosia, for that. Nikki, what's your last word to all of us?
Yes, my last word will be for us. For instance, I didn't realize there was a network like this, and this is a wonderful thing that you guys are doing. I was invited by yourself, and I think it is very important for us to reach out to other Black women as well, other BAME women in the community that are in position of authorities, and bring them into this network, because like Bina said, we can't do it alone. We have to go as a group. So the more we get other members, other people, get them interested, the larger we become and the greater impact we can make as a body. So that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Super. Esther?
I'm seeing a question here from Tanika.
Yeah.
how do we continue to celebrate Black history without other communities feeling excluded, and about the visibility point. And then she raised the George Floyd incident, sudden influx of information, and how do we incorporate it into maths, art history. I really feel, again, passionate about the fact that all the information is there, but we need an honest telling of history. It needs to be honest and reflective of what happened. So if I go back, for instance, you're teaching maths. Yes, it's good to do your algebra and your place value, but just for the teacher to be knowledgeable, for the educational training to understand where these symbols came from. That the zero is from the Indian subcontinent. Al-Jab was from Baghdad. That's where you get the term algebra. So there, automatically, you become inclusive in the delivery of a core subject, because every subject has a context. So I would argue for an honest telling of history, which is inclusive rather than being exclusive. Another example, we have the word immigration and emigration. As soon as you say those words, they connotate images of who an immigrant is. An immigrant being somebody who comes into the country. If you look at the Romans who came, the Saxons who came, they were immigrants. That is not reflected because we have we've settled for stereotypes. This is what I mean by an honest telling of history and of knowledge and of information. I would like to see more teachers do that. Black teachers need to be more visible and need to be coming through, not just going through the system, but coming out and be out there in education to raise those percentages. But also white teachers need to know this knowledge. This is not exclusive knowledge. This is the truth as it exists, and it needs to be told in that way. So yeah, I think that's me, and I'm really, really excited about the women on the team. Thank you.
Oh, that is really super. And just to say, Danielle, do you have anything to say? It's always nice to have you in our BAME community, but also the fact that you're a woman, I'm sure you have something to share.
And an educator, of course. It has been my pleasure and absolute delight to be sitting in on this conversation, and I have found the speakers, to a woman, absolutely inspirational. And I know we have still got a huge job to do to dismantle the power structures that are holding us back as a society from being equal, from being honest, from being able to give of our best, and being able to help all our children achieve absolutely what they want to do. But the important thing for me now is that this is all on YouTube. It is on the Borough Council's website. Please, ladies, share that link, because this conversation deserves a much, as big an audience as we can find for it. I take really, really seriously all the challenges that have been issued today, from dismantling the power relations around race, around gender. Institutional racism is still a huge force that we have to deal with all the time. It disempowers all of us, and it badly affects our children. So, all power to you, sisters. Just an amazing conversation. Thank you.
Marianne, what's your take?
Let me just start saying thank you so much to everyone, every speaker, everyone who attended today. Thank you so much. I'm educated this afternoon. I'm really educated. They say every single day is a classroom, and we have learned a lot. And it's what is being taught in this classroom. And it's everybody's responsibility, Black or white, to make sure that this information is passed on. So we need to get all our colleagues on board to try and educate people so that this information is shared. The education, for me, is really key. It's a very personal thing. I'll mention quickly, my mom was not educated. My mom was not educated because the system was that the boys needed to be educated. So when her brothers got of age, she needed to stop going to school so that her brothers would get education. So, and because of that, she was so determined that her children will be educated. So it is so personal to make sure that our children and the next generation get the education so that we do not have this gap. Educate a woman, you educate the village, you educate the community, you educate the nation, you educate the globe. Because if we have 50% of the population being women, then that woman is the one who right now, especially with COVID, who is sitting at home teaching their children. Now, my concern here and now is that children will be going back to school in a week or, in a week's time. The community that has really been greatly impacted, generally speaking, has been the BAME community. And these children will be going back to school. Here and now is, for me, is what support these children will have when they go back to school. So in terms of policy and in terms of resources, whoever is going to be looking at that, I think that needs to be taken into consideration. The other thing, as I raised earlier, is the concern about not having BAME teachers and having these teachers being the ones who are going to determine the grades for our children. It's how we are going to empower the BAME community in terms of their parents and how they can make appeals if they're not happy with the results that are going, or the grades that are going to be given to their children. Because I suspect, I don't have any evidence for this, but I suspect most of them might just accept the grades that the children are going to be given because they don't want to challenge the status quo. So here and now, we need to be empowering parents to be able to have the power and the capacity to challenge the grades their children are going to be given, knowing that for sure we do not have the right representation, we do not have the right people at the table, therefore we are on the menu and we have to have the power to get off the menu and get at the table. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much. I think we need to revisit this again. I think there's still so much more we can squeeze out of this discussion to enable us to get the policymakers to hear us. We need the policymakers. So thank you so much for joining.
Marianne, can I just say your mother was educated. She had education. The fact that you said, my mother wasn't, she was. Yes. She was a very educated woman, but in a different way to what we understand education to be. She was a gifted woman who gave you many an opportunity. Okay, remember that.
Yes, and just to end on this really positive note that yes, we need aspiration. We talked about that, but the most important thing is also we are, like Mosia said about dolphins. In the African way, we say Ubuntu. I am because we are. So I cannot be on my own in isolation, but together we can make a big change. If there are any parents out there who will get results that they know their children are not deserving, please get in touch with, I'm sure someone in this group can support you through that journey of challenging the schools, especially boys. Boys normally do very well when they sit an exam rather than continuous assessment. If you've got a child who does better in that way, please be open and speak to community leaders. We have people here who will advise you, but also be interested in your children's education and be proactive. We've got Impact, the charity here, Impact, now in Northampton. We've got Esther Mcintosh's Ignite. I'm sure she'll give you advice. We've got Mosia, who's always there. We've got Danielle, who will always find somebody to help you if she can't. Nilam's team is also there. They're all educators. They've said it. If there's any mother out there or a dad or even a child who doesn't have any support, we will find somebody to support you there. A lot of our children have lost family members, so there's a lot of grieving as well. So on top of now trying to push for your children's grades, You may be going through grieving. Cruise offers support for loss for free. So get some counseling and get some support. And it's not only here in England that people are losing family. Some of us have family abroad. People are dying and we can't go to funerals. Again, there's a lot of pressure in terms of Black and ethnic minority groups. Remember that there will be some support. You are not alone. Like, again, we go back to storytelling. This is about dolphins. We will walk together. It's about Ubuntu. We can sit down and work out where we can get support for one another. But the most important thing is we have to get our children educated. Whatever the circumstances, we can get through a good education for children. So thanks very much, everybody. So I would say a big thank you again to James, who's going to cut us off, but please, ladies, don't go. Once we are off YouTube, for all those following on YouTube, thank you very much.